Gentlemen, thank you for coming here virtually and physically. So online, we have John Linsenberger. We have Jin Hart. And let's go around the table, introduce ourselves.
Louis Grimm, Sully District, First Vice President, representing Franklin Farm.
Jim Neighbors, Secretary and representing Solid Station.
Jay Johnston, Treasurer, representing Virginia Run.
Ronnie Hobbs, Connection and Centerview.
Got that?
That's fine. Before it gets dark outside.
It's okay that way, yeah. You could probably flip the door closed too.
Is that?
You could probably flip the door closed,
Yeah.
or we might disturb the adjacent people.
Oh, it's Jay. I thought it was Ted. It's Jay.
Jim, go ahead.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Yes, please. Basically, we have 3 resolutions to consider.
Yeah, I did, drafts of, 3 resolutions. I thought that, well, which one do you want to do first?
Well, let's get rid of the fast one. Since Parking Reimagined, we can postpone. I think they haven't scheduled the hearing on that yet, have they?
Well, I think what happened was they said they had to reschedule it because ZMOD, the Parking Reimagined, the way they wrote it, would have amended ZMOD, but ZMOD is thrown out, at least for now, so they're gonna postpone that. But what I did was, I drafted the resolution, which I thought had everything in it that you said, about specific objections to it, endorsing the Reston and EQUAC positions, requesting that the Planning Commission recommend denial, requesting that the board deny it. And the objections were that 1.3 for apartments is too low, and it's gonna have overflow parking into neighborhoods, that the administrative reductions by the director without notice in a public hearing disrespect the importance of citizen input. I guess there's a typo there to fix. There's no quid pro quo for additional green space or tree save in exchange for a parking reduction. They should require a net environmental benefit. I put in a paragraph about the disabled parking spaces and the conflict with waiver of loading spaces. And I thought those were the points that had been raised in the emails. As I said, I think there's one typo in B, but I think that can be fixed. But other than that, I guess I'm guessing a little bit, but I think I got in there what everyone said pretty much.
Okay, I recommend that at this time, since it's not timely, they don't have a date yet, and I suspect the date will be subsequent to our 15 May meeting, that we hold off and concentrate on the ones that are upcoming, the ones that are scheduled for early May. And that's the ZMOD number 2 and the truck ban on Bull Run Post Office Road. If you have the
I think, Jeff, if we do it, it would help other groups. I mean, because I think we were piggybacking a little bit on others, and I think that in those emails, there's like McLean or somebody McLean was doing something. I mean, I don't know what's going to change between now and then.
Understand, but let's get the 2 timely ones, then we'll circle back to Parking Reimagined.
All right.
Okay?
I think the truck ban is easier.
All right, so let's do the ban first.
And I really just kind of recycled what we had before. I put in there the dates about, you know, what happened with the board and whatnot, but the punchline is we're asking them to reinstate the truck ban on Bull Run Post Office Road and ask VDOT to have the CTB act within the 9-month deadline this time. And pretty much everything in there is the reasons we had before. It's a terrible road. It shouldn't have truck traffic. They've been very slow. We want the truck ban.
So does anybody have an objection to our position on Bull Run Post Office Road?
No objection position. One thing I might suggest is who would we be sending this resolution to? Just the Planning Commission and the Board of Supervisors?
No,
Well, no.
not them at all. There's a guy at VDOT, and we'd be sending it to VDOT and the CTB. The signs that are up on the road now, I can't remember if it has an email address or a phone number or what, but the guy from VDOT had sent out an email, and they put an ad in the center view, actually, and it said submit comments to him by, I forget, but it's a few days away still. So he's soliciting the comments for VDOT wanted the comments, and so that's where we would send it. The board isn't doing anything that, I mean, we could send it to them, I guess, but the board isn't doing anything. The planning commission's not involved. It's VDOT and the CTB at this point.
Okay, we'll send copies to, you know, the normal folks, the Department of Transportation, Kathy Smith, our Fairfax Transportation Advisory Commission for Sully.
Hey, Jim.
Jeff, I have the guy's email. I have his name in his email somewhere. I can't remember, but I think it's in the ad that was in the center view also. It's like Frank something or Fred something. Maybe it starts with an M or an N, but we've got his address and his email somewhere.
Okay.
We should send it to the senator and delegate and down the legislature in Richmond also, or not?
Couldn't hurt.
Yeah, I didn't think it would hurt because they've helped us before with VDOT.
Right.
I think we're actually orphans right now. I mean, we have a
Okay.
delegate and a senator, but we don't get to vote for them anymore.
Oh, okay. Well, it wouldn't hurt to at least send it to them. Maybe they'll pass it on to their replacements.
Hey, Jim, this is Jim. How often they renew this? Is every few years?
The truck ban?
Yes.
Well, it would be permanent if it goes in, and it was supposed to be permanent the last time. I mean, unless the CTB for whatever reason revoked it, but VDOT took the signs down. And we've been floundering around since then, but this has been going on for about 20 years.
They took the signs down 20 years ago. They took the signs down.
No, it was approved 20 years ago, and then a few years later, they decided that somehow something in Loudon didn't make sense, that they hadn't advertised it properly or something like that. It's very confusing. And it's very difficult to explain. But even though it had been approved, they decided it hadn't been approved and we had to start over. But this went in, I mean, it may have been more than 20 years, but it was a long time ago. And when it first went in was before Bull Run Post Office Road was paved up to Braddock. It was just a very bumpy gravel road. Once you got like a tenth of a mile into Loudon, after that, it was just gravel. We had a problem on Pleasant Valley Road, and we got a truck ban on that. And the feds came in and fixed, I think, 3 curbs. They had to close the road one summer to do that. And then we also got one on the other part of Bull Run Post Office Road and Compton. And they were all kind of around the same time. There were a couple accidents where school buses like smacked the mirrors going past each other. And I think there were some accidents on the S curve too, and that was around the time that the trucks were prohibited on the S curve. Although I don't think we did that. I think that somehow that happened extraneous from the citizens asking for it.
Okay.
Somebody else may remember. Jeff may know.
Okay.
I also think, didn't the repaving invalidate a reason for why the truck ban was in place?
I'm sorry, the repaving did what?
Invalidate one of the reasons why the truck ban was in effect?
Well, I think it might have justified it more because before that was paved, trucks, no truck would take that going up to Braddock or 50. They would maybe cut over in Cedar Ridge. Cedar Ridge Boulevard goes over to Gum Springs Road. You can get around the 29-234 stoplight in the Battlefield. The left turn lane is very short. And so if there's an accident on 66 or something, that intersection backs up for miles. But if you go up Bull Run Post Office Road and turn left on Cedar Ridge Boulevard, you can cut over to Gum Springs Road and avoid the 29-234 mess. And some trucks would do that. Once they paved the piece going up north to Braddock, trucks can do that to get up to 50. And they don't need to go all the way out to Route 15 or wait on 28, I guess. And so there's a lot more traffic. The other thing that happened, I think, was whatever they're doing at the quarry, every couple minutes, there's a dump truck. And there's more trucks flying around than there ever were before. When they were taking the stone out, you know, there were a few trucks, I guess, but it seems to me now, wherever I go, I'm behind a dump truck. I mean, John and Jen may say the same thing too, but there's a lot more trucks.
Yeah, they're filling up the quarry with all the excess dirt from the 66 hot lanes.
Now, that's pretty much stopped now. They're still bringing in soil someplace, not nearly as much as they were. But I agree with you, Jim. There seems to be a lot more trucks on the road between the quarries now than there have been in the past. So they're either moving compositions from one of the quarries into the other or something.
Okay. So
The people that we want to contact over VDOT is
So-
Thomas E. Volt, Folse.
you'll send me that email address?
I can give it to you.
Okay, yeah. And I'll prepare that to send it and send it to the other members of this Sully Legislative Caucus as it's now constituted. And we will be inviting them to our May meeting for our annual legislative review. We can mention that at that time as well. So if there's no objection, I'll accept the vote in favor. All those say aye, say aye.
Aye.
Right.
Jim?
Yeah, the
Okay.
last one?
I'll take as a yes.
He's not a voting member.
Oh, he's not a voting member. Thank
You
you.
made the motion.
It's unanimous.
Yeah. Well, I
Unanimous.
wasn't really voting. I think I'm just a scrivener.
Okay, it's a unanimous endorsement of the motion. Thank you. You're in favor?
Okay.
Unanimous. So-
Thanks, Jim, for all the work you put into that thing.
Absolutely.
I do.
You know, well,
One
you
other
know,
point, Jim, that you might
It's like
want to
Rip Van
consider.
Winkle. I mean, how long is this gonna take? 20 years?
Yeah.
Well, you ready for the last one, Jeff?
Yeah, well, let me make a technical point. John, your voice is much more understandable than Jim. What did you do to make your voice more understandable, John?
I logged in from Ocean City, Maryland, rather than Centerville.
Yeah, but do you have a microphone or what is it that you're using to speak?
My
I'm
laptop.
using the Same.
And it's a new laptop. Maybe the technology's improved.
Okay,
Cranked up to 100. I don't know what it could be.
well, it's not the voice, it's the quality of your voice, Jim. It's not the sound, it's,
This is muffled.
you're more muffled. And I don't think it's, you're at 100%, but it's just, as John says, it's probably a difference in quality in microphones, okay? I just make that because all I know is when I hear John and I hear Jim, John is vibrant right there.
Is it a connection problem? Sometimes I've encountered that with other people using Zoom and Teams.
You all are much clearer than usual.
I
Okay,
think
Hey,
maybe
Jeff. Hey,
the
Jeff.
laptop
There's a bandwidth problem in Virginia Run. That's what it is.
Okay, all right, we won't comment on that. All
Nice
right,
try, John.
let's go to the next item, which on the agenda,
Brain width problem in Virginia Run? Is that what you said?
Bandwidth problem.
which means that we need 76 trombones to lead the parade, so the band has greater width. Come on.
Lost me on that one.
Okay, my daughter played in,
I know the song.
okay, all right, Jim, why don't we go back to ZMOD?
Okay, well, I did the same thing on ZMOD. I took the old resolution and I sort of, I edited it down a little bit and I put in the dates for things that happened. I kept all the same reasons, but I added one. And for everything that, where we said we opposed it, basically I said we reiterated our opposition to it. The process things, they're rushing it. They're not giving groups an opportunity. I mean, if you saw that staff report, it's 3 pages long and it says nothing other than that they indisputably complied with everything. And that's exactly the opposite of what the court said. But there's no reasons, there's no justification, there's not one word about data centers, nothing. We were opposed to anything that doesn't protect residential neighborhoods. We oppose something that doesn't protect the Occoquan watershed and drinking water. For the specific provisions, we were opposing abolishing the public hearings for the accessory apartments. We were supporting retaining the previous public hearing process, which is what the Planning Commission had recommended. We were opposing abolition of the over 55 disabled criteria. Opposing the maximum size limitation being waived if it's in the basement, because then we're going to get stacked duplexes. For the home businesses, we opposed abolishing the public hearings, and we opposed allowing them in homes on well and septic. The chemicals are going into the groundwater. And I think there was another article very recently about the level of PFAS is already over in the Occoquan Reservoir.
Right.
And staff had said, oh, well, we don't think that's an issue because yada, yada, yada. And I don't know what the thing was. And then when it got to the board, Kathy, and I think the Planning Commission had agreed with us before. When it got to the board, Kathy said, oh, well, we'll just will make everything subject to health department approval, which has nothing to do with PFAs. So she's solving a problem without solving it. So anyway, I left that in there. We opposed the unlimited delivery traffic on the home businesses. Every single family lot have online sales and food production, whatever. It's too much. That we opposed the administrative permits for special events. There's no limits on size of crowds or anything. For enforcement, we reiterated the opposition that relying on neighbors isn't going to work. Signage and the 12 square foot limitation. With all the signs in the neighborhood, it's going to change the character. We opposed food trucks through administrative approval. We opposed the unlimited number of freestanding accessory structures with a cap of up to 50% of the gross floor area of the principal structure and raising the height limit to 25 feet. Again, that's going to change the character of neighborhoods. I added 2 more paragraphs. One of them was opposed to making data centers by right. We didn't say anything about that the last time, or if we did, I don't remember, but it wasn't in the resolution. I think in the last 2 years, we've gotten a lot more information about the problems with the data centers, that they suck up enormous quantities of water and electricity. They make noise. They pollute the air with the diesel generators so much that DEQ, we had a near miss with them, but DEQ had advertised relaxing the air pollution standards for Fairfax, Loudoun, Prince William, because the data centers, the fumes from the diesel generators on the data centers were going to push us over between March and July. They scaled that back to just Loudoun, and then they dropped it entirely. I think they got enough citizen complaints against it. But I think the observation I would have made is that if the data centers, if the existing infrastructure is not enough to support the data centers, or if their operation is going to push us over the air pollution standards, this is not the place to put them. Put them out in Death Valley or something with solar power, or do something else, but not here. And the other problem, and I didn't put this in the motion, maybe someone else will bring this up, but I think we've learned also that when infrastructure capacity improvements are needed, where they need substations or transmission lines, the applicants are not paying for that. The consumers are paying for that. So we don't need these additional substations or transmission lines. They do. But then they make everybody pay for it with increased rates. And that shouldn't be happening. If they want to go somewhere, they should go somewhere where there's electrical capacity to do it. The final paragraph I added was, just in general, reiterating the opposition to the Agritourism amendment. Everything in the new updated ZMOD is ZMOD plus everything that's happened since. And I think the worst in that batch was probably agritourism. We had a number of issues about that, and most significantly, I think the by right party venue use, if you have either agriculture or silviculture. Silviculture is just trees. Everybody has trees. No public hearing, no notice to neighbors, no development conditions, and a big parking lot. And the parking lot uses were all restricted in 1982 with the downzoning to the corridors along the arterial roadways, which had already been largely disturbed anyway. Between 1982 and last year, there were no real SE or SP non-residential uses with parking lots allowed in the RC, except on like Route 29 or Braddock Road or something where 123 Shirley Gate Road, if it was an arterial, they could have a non-residential use with a parking lot, but not on side roads like Bull Run Post Office Road, for example. Agritourism changed that. Kathy said, oh, well, they need to have birthday parties at Cox Farms. Well, I think they could probably have birthday parties anyway, but Braddock Road is an arterial, so it's not, it still didn't have to open up the whole RC to whatever. Anyway, I added that paragraph. We could have said a lot more, but it's already 7 pages long. I put this on paper. The attachments would be the older resolutions. What I considered was maybe it should have, maybe data centers should have been at the top of the list, but it was easier to write it this way. And I think the environmental groups certainly are going to bring up the whole data center thing. And I think that's a new and different issue, even though the text is the same. I think public awareness has grown in the past 2 years. So anyway, it's basically the same resolution, but instead of just saying opposed, it's like reiterating opposition. I added a paragraph about data centers. I added a paragraph about agritourism. And I think it's consistent with basically the other groups that took a position last time. I mean, I think everybody said something a little different, but I think we were right in the mainstream of, you know, Jeff says, oh, there were 70 speakers. I don't know if there were 70 speakers, but and that public hearing was a mess anyway, with everybody. You couldn't hear them on the phone, and the videos, you couldn't respond to anything. I think this is consistent with what we said. I think it's consistent with what the other groups had said.
Okay, I am going to, well, first, any objection to what we have talked about? We've already been on record opposing the agritourism, opposing ZMOD, and early on, we opposed the process of rushing it. And it seems to me they're still rushing it. So
I'd like to speak to that, Jeff.
Please, John.
I got an email from Nell Hurley, who was on the PC when Jim and I were there. She lives in Prescott, Arizona, but she's still tracking ZMOD and opposing it. So I think her points were that the staff is also rushing this because they're sick of it and want to get it behind them. So I think it's good that we stand up to this thing the way Jim has, and we support it unanimously.
John, I don't have any sympathy for the folks that are working on it. They're sick of it. I mean, that's their job. That's what they're there to do. They rushed it through the last time, jammed the darn thing down our throats. Now they want to turn around and do it again.
Exactly. That's just what Nell said. Exactly.
This is a do-over. You know, in golf, they call it a mulligan. Sit down,
Yeah.
time to review it, listen to what the people have to say, get commissions and groups of people together and talk about it, come up with something that we can all live with, not something that just the planning commission or the board of supervisors can live with.
Right.
We're gonna end up with another piece of crap.
And something that adheres to what we were told originally ZMOD was going to do.
Yeah, just be
Clean-
clarification.
Clean
Clean up.
things up,
Yeah.
resolve minor conflicts,
So that would,
not a total complete rewrite. I think what Jim has put together is a very excellent resolution. An editorial suggestion I would make is every time we say opposes, we preface that with either strongly opposes or strongly and unanimously oppose. Just to keep highlighting that, keep hitting them with it. That's point one. Point two is I would like to suggest going much further in terms of who gets copies of this resolution. And I'll call that two subsets, a group A and a group B. The group A, beyond the usual suspects of the Board of Supervisors and the Planning Commission, could include, but not be limited to, within the Commonwealth of Virginia, all members of the House of Delegates and the State Senate who represent any portion of Fairfax County. Second would be the Fairfax County Commonwealth Attorney. Third would be the Commonwealth Attorney General.
Attorney General of the State of Virginia.
Attorney General of the State of Virginia. And fourth would be Governor Youngkin. And perhaps even the State Supreme Court. That's my group A. My group B would be to say, well, let's also send copies to all the federal representatives. Every member of the House of Representatives who represents some portion of Fairfax County, both United States senators. And if we want to have a group C, that would be the broader media, all the major television stations, the Washington Post, and all other printed media serving the area.
All right, so I had, after the state senator, you had the Post, and then who did you have? Radio and TV
Yeah,
stations?
all metro area radio and television stations.
And and the Connection and newspapers, right?
Connection, Washington Post,
Mhm.
all of them. I mean, if we really want to, I'll use the phrase, get the attention of the Board of Supervisors as to our individual and collective displeasure, copying all these people might help to do that.
I'm gonna look to you to help me. I've got this, since I'll be sending it out, if you can provide me some of those links, especially to the media. Because I can get the reps who represent Fairfax and the senators and
Right.
things like that.
I'd probably
Go ahead.
put on there, the BZA and EQUAC, and maybe I just didn't think of it, but, I think if it's widely spread out, more people find out about it, maybe it gets a little more attention before the public hearing, because they're trying to sneak this through under cover of darkness and hope that nobody notices. And staff apparently is telling the board, it's just the same couple people. And at least one of the board members is saying, they're not really hearing any problems with it, with either data centers or, ZMOD. Oh, and I should have said, Jeff, on the data centers, the paragraph it's opposing making them by right. It's not saying we're never going to do it. It's saying we need notice in a public hearing so citizens can participate and we can talk about it and have development conditions or something. Maybe we would have maybe we would do a data center under certain circumstances, but making it by right cuts the citizens out of the discussion.
Okay, so Jim, I have, other than for the comments by Lewis, which included the distribution and changing the word to strongly unanimously opposes, we've added a new paragraph to object to data centers by right and added paragraphs to include our objections to agritourism, which is now included
On
in
page 7.
what?
They're on page 7.
Right, so my point being, I'm looking at page 7 now, and go wrong document, all right, down there, that's the other one. Okay, so my question is, I think we will identify that for the sake of Bonnie and others, that these are the new things. This is a reiteration of what we had in the past, and we're now updating it since they've modified it in a slight way to combine agritourism and ZMOD. We've included the ZMOD and agritourism, and we've added this new item of data centers by right,
He
as
did,
we believe that is an important change.
he did, in G and H.
Yeah.
We already did.
Right.
Okay? So
And
that's
Jeff,
good.
I sent it to you, Jeff, in Word. Can you make Lou's edits, or do you need me to do anything else?
No, I can do that.
And can you put it on letterhead?
And yeah, but by the time I'm finished, it will smell perfectly.
And then,
Okay?
Jeff, when you're done with these, I think it would help for purposes of cross-pollination, if we send these out to, like, the Federation and some of these other district councils or HOAs, because I know they're all talking about this. They're all trying to do something. And if we've done it, maybe it encourages a few more of them to step up.
I will do that. I will send it to the district reps, and I'll send it to the committee chairs of the Federation and to the Mount Vernon, to the Providence, to the, I don't think there's a Springfield, to the Mason and Franconia and other groups. So there's no Hunter Mill
The
organization.
Reston people, I think they hate it.
Yes,
Lake Falls, they hate it.
I'm gonna send it to that unauthorized list as well.
I mean, if you need help with that unauthorized list.
You know, the name that shall not be named, those who shall not be named, okay?
Quasi-official.
You're right. Okay,
Whether
then we
they're
give thanks.
authorized or not, you can send an email to whoever you want. It's a free country.
I understand, I do anyway, okay? All right, so we've got that. All those in favor say aye?
Aye.
Okay, I hear it unanimously. All
Are
right,
you
let's
sending
go,
it to Kathy and Jeff?
say again?
Are you sending it to Kathy and Jeff?
Oh, of course, they're gonna get a copy.
I'd like to hand them
The
one.
first people on the list are the
Oh,
POS,
You know-
BOS, PC, and staff, then the BZA, the EQUOC, that's the internal distribution, then the state distribution, then the federal distribution, then the media distribution.
Jeff, I meant to
Jeff?
say also, this is coming up in a couple weeks. I don't know who signed up or for what, but Sully District Council gets a speaker, WCCA gets a speaker, any HOA gets a speaker. They all would get 10 minutes. I think if we have different points to make, and we have at least 8 or 10 topics, I think, if there were multiple speakers, they can emphasize a different focus. That sort of thing requires a little bit of organization and delegation, but I don't know who's speaking for what, but maybe that's worth considering.
Well, I'd like somebody to sign up for the Western Fairfax group, okay? And I'm sure I could cajole somebody from the Federation. And, I'm certain that there'll be other committee members as well. So once this is posted, I'm gonna recommend people sign up, give them the links, and say that we ought to coordinate our testimony so that we can go in depth in certain items. The Federation board meeting is this Thursday, which will give the Federation an opportunity to do the same thing. It objected to these originally, and will give it an opportunity to reaffirm its opposition. Then we can coordinate our testimonies. Okay?
Sounds good.
So after
What's
this-
the hearing, Jeff? When's the hearing? May 17th?
No,
No.
May 3rd.
Hey,
May 3rd and May 9th.
May 3rd, okay.
3rd is planning commission, May 9th is the board. And the other nasty thing about that is that there's no time to defer it. There's no time to make edits. There's no time to consider what anybody, I mean, it's just kind of rush it through.
And that's all intentional.
Yeah.
So if it passes again.
So-
we have to
Well, we
put
have
it
we
down
have to
for-
take a step back. We gotta read Craig's email that came out today. Craig's email explained more detail about what's gonna happen and what's not gonna happen and the timeline.
Right.
I don't remember the details. I've got the email. But his email was pretty clear on how they would have to approach this, that they don't think they can take another vote to approve. And because they may want to go back to the court and ask them for, I forget what the term is.
It's a petition for rehearing, and
Petition
they're
for
almost
rehearing.
never granted, and particularly if there was no dissent the first time and the decision was unanimous, they gotta persuade some justice to change his or her mind, and even if they do, all that gets them is another round of briefing, maybe. It also takes a while, and the May 9th thing will happen long before anything ripens on the rehearing. The one thing that may help, and particularly if there's enough of a visible opposition to it in the community, is last time the vote was 7-3. A 5-5 vote fails. Several of them are running for re-election, and they've got primaries coming up in a few weeks. If they look bad in the vote on this, or if there's some other reason, it could be data centers, it could be the process, it could be anything. If they look bad in doing this, they may not be anxious to do that right before an election, or particularly right before a contested election. And so they may chicken out, and they've chickened out on things at least twice that I can remember, where there were several hundred letters or several hundred emails, and people were angry and against something. They did that on, I don't know if you remember the dance floor measurement thing, which was silly. But there were some stabbings at like dance halls, and so they decided they were going to crack down on the size of dance floors to minimize these late night stabbings, and that all blew up. But there was a lot of publicity about it, and they looked like idiots. The other time was on residential studios, where they were going to have like not like motels exactly, but housing for like not like a boarding house exactly, but cheap one room, not a flop house. I don't know what to call it, but kind of like a cheap motel.
Efficiency. It was an efficiency, Jim.
Efficiency, yeah. And it was a mess, and it was complicated, and they chickened out halfway through, and then they said, well, keep doing it, but just make it R20 and above. And at that point, the planning commission said, well, forget that. I mean, the price of land at R20 and above, it's a catch-22. Nobody that can afford to buy land that's zoned R20 could be, the highest and best use wouldn't be a flop house. What they needed was
Efficiency.
efficiency, a flop house, whatever it was. By raising it to R20, it could never happen, and so it would never be in a neighborhood either, because there's no neighborhoods that are R20. It's just apartments. So they chickened out on that. And if it's politically, if there's enough of a groundswell, they get nervous, and maybe that could happen. Rodney sometimes votes with Walter, and so if Rodney flipped for whatever reason, now we're at 6-4. All you need is one more. Penny Gross and Faust are both retiring. At some point, maybe they get angry about something. They don't care. or somebody else gets a little nervous, at 5-5, it fails. All we need to do is change 2 votes. We already have data centers as a big brand new issue, and maybe there's something else. So I don't think this is hopeless. I mean, Kathy and Jeff always have 6 votes, but it's not hopeless. And maybe this is going back to court again, because if they screwed up before, they're going to screw up again.
I got a suggestion, Jeff.
Listening,
Yeah.
John.
In addition to sending it to the media and the elected officials, why don't you get ones to the people that are opposing these people in the primary?
If I could get the addresses for those people, I could send them unofficially.
I can get you.
Okay,
Okay?
In fact, I think
just
I
an
can get you.
idea.
All right, I
I
have no
think
problem
Jeff
with that. but I
has
would
an
not-
opponent. I don't think
letter.
Kathy has a primary opponent. Jeff
I
does.
don't- Jeff does, but what I'm saying is I would not send that to the official distribution to the primary opponents. That would
Back
be
channel, back channel.
back channel.
Yeah,
that's
that
what I'm
makes
saying.
sense.
Okay, all right, let's go to Parking
We
Reimagined,
know how to do that.
if you wish.
Oh, okay, well, I wrote it up. I mean, same drill. We had some objections. I went through those. We support what the Reston group was saying. We support what EQUAC was saying. We want the planning commission to recommend denial, and we want the board to deny it. And maybe that should be distributed too. And again, I think the closer this gets to the election, and maybe they'll get it past the primary, this is awful. This is a mess, and they're going to dump this. I mean, they're going to look like there's nothing good for neighborhoods about less parking than there is already. There are too many cars in some neighborhoods now. And in some of a townhouse neighborhood that's near apartments, if the apartments are now going to be parking on the streets, and if with these administrative approvals, existing apartment complexes can come in for an administrative approval to reduce their parking and do something else on the rest of their site, that aggravates the overflow parking into the streets that are nearby. The more that's pushed out into the neighborhood, the worse it gets. On top of all these other stupid problems. This started out, this was going to be, I don't know what it was going to be, but that it was an opportunity to get green space or tree save in exchange for a parking reduction. And instead, that's not part of it. We're just reducing the parking and they're going to do more of something else. Everybody hates this too, I think. I think there'll be more groups against it. But again, it seems like we could be in the first wave and, you know, it sort of cross-pollinates.
So one of the things, I chaired a committee of Federation and other people in the county who were interested in the Parking Reimagined. They came up with key points, and they had some pros and they had some cons. Let me just tell you what the pros were they came up with. A reduction of parking could drive more use of public transit. That might be a good thing. And the parking reductions cut building costs to builders and developers, which could be passed to their residents. That could be a good thing. It provides an option for people who prefer not to have vehicles. Therefore, they live in a community with a reduced parking, and that happens. And the policy, and one of the pros might be, policy might be better implemented close to metro area, station areas rather than county-wide. Okay, now some of the cons were spaces designated for people with disabilities are taken because people are desperate for parking. Impinges on people who require autos for work. And originally I said, you know, if you're in a type of job where you need a car, and they were talking about social economic, and I said, no, let's not make it social economic, and just people who need cars for work. whatever they do, painting, housemaids, things like that. Or they work for two jobs and public transportation can't satisfy them. It discriminates against people who are underserved by public transportation. If you have to take buses that run infrequently, then maybe depending on Parking Reimagined and reducing the number of parking spaces is adverse to you. Does not allow for adequate community input, less than 7 months needed. Does not, a director of land services development needs review by the public. Right now, that person makes the decision by his or herself that should be reviewed. Parking reduction decisions need to consider the impact on surrounding neighborhoods. Those decisions are not now considered. Any parking reduction needs to be met with an environmental benefit or green space. That's not there now. Implies that the county is on the hook for better public transportation. If you say you don't need cars because we got good transportation and it isn't good, then you're saying that you're going to improve it. But I don't think the county can. And we just saw it in today's post where the District of Columbia is cutting back on their routes because they don't have enough money. And policy should be tailored on an area by area basis. So I think these are things that, if they're not in there, I may include some of these points in that. If there are any objections or any thoughts.
Yes, I think they're largely included in both Reston and EQUAC. And I did specifically refer to that. I mean, the Reston had a very long motion with a lot of things in it, and EQUAC had a long letter looking at sort of a holistic approach. And I think almost everything you said is in one or the other.
Okay, there's another one. Somebody gave me a chat GPT critique of reducing minimum parking requirements. They went to one of these automated bots and said, tell me about it. And these are some 5 areas that the automated intelligence came up with. Increased traffic congestion. Some people argue that reducing minimum parking requirements will lead to more people driving and parking in the street, which can lead to increased traffic congestion. There might be reduced property values. Some people argue that reduced parking requirements can reduce property values because potential buyers may be deterred by lack of parking spaces. Limited public input. Critics argue that zoning changes that reduce minimum parking may be made without adequate public input and consideration of the needs of local residents. Safety concerns. Some people argue that reducing minimum parking requirements can lead to safety concerns such as increased pedestrian traffic and accidents. Lack of parking availability. Some people argue that reducing minimum parking requirements can lead to a lack of parking availability, which can negatively impact local businesses and residents. Impact on the environment. Critics argue that reducing minimum parking requirements can lead to increased air pollution and greenhouse gas emissions as more people may be driving and parking on the street. And equity concerns. Some people argue that reduced minimum parking requirements can have a disproportionate impact on low-income and minority communities who may have less access to transportation alternatives such as public transportation or car sharing services. Overall, these are the various concerns that need to be carefully considered while making zoning changes to minimize parking requirements. Important to take a holistic approach that considers the needs of all stakeholders and mitigates any negative impacts. How'd you like that last paragraph for the automated bot? Oh, everything is possible.
Not bad.
Not bad. That's what I thought. Okay. So
Jeff, on the
Go ahead.
economic impact, the sentence I didn't hear, or maybe you said it, I just didn't hear it. The impact on the folks that need a car to get to work. If they've only got 1.3 spaces for the apartment, but there's 2 cars in the household, some of those folks are going to have to pay for private parking in a garage or a lot that maybe they're taking a bus to or something. They have to have a car to get to work. They have to store the car somewhere. And then that's even more money in the developer's pocket, not just the cost savings for not building the parking to begin with, but the income from the private parking that would otherwise have had to been provided for car number 2.
How would these people get to the
And
store?
those people are the least able to pay for it.
Agreed? Agreed. And so did you have that in there or not?
Did I know? No, well, I didn't, but that may be in the Reston thing a little bit.
Okay, well, what I think I'm gonna do is everybody agrees that this is a good document to start with. And I'm gonna play with it and send out a reduce, another copy, modify it with some of the points here if I don't see them in there.
We can come back to this next month because I don't think they're gonna, I mean, I don't know when they're gonna reschedule it, but I think it will be after the board votes on ZMOD. And then we have another meeting a few days later, so I think we still would have time to do whatever.
Okay, so that's good. I will send out another draft. I'll take Jim's draft and take these two things that I just mentioned and kind of meld them together to see what I can come up with, all right? And we'll send that out.
And I think that maybe one of the major points to really stress on that is that this concept of parking reimagined is not, all capitalized, bold, underlined, applicable on a countywide basis. It is very location specific. It makes sense if you're talking about a transit station area, a fixed guideway transit station area. And that's about it.
We do recognize that this is only for new construction
No,
and
it's not. It could be administrative approval on anything.
So Jim, I'm trying to understand this. So if this gets passed, I'm at Sully Station.
Yeah,
So the county will mandate and go back and say, you need to go to 1.3 parking places. The bulldozers will come in
no,
and rip apart.
they're not
Our entire-
mandating anything. What they're allowing is that, let's say, the Sully Station Shopping Center, which has whatever it has, and maybe weaker shopping centers, the number of parking spaces doesn't matter as much, but an older approval or a by right situation, office, a retail shopping center, some other use, where they didn't proffer to a number of parking spaces, they can come in for an administrative reduction and say, please administratively reduce the parking. We want to develop this side of the site now with another building or an apartment, something. And so without a public hearing, they might get an administrative reduction for what's there. They're not going to come in and say, Sully Station, now you have to cut your parking spaces for the townhouses. They're not going to do that. And in fact, I think it would be unlikely because the HOA is the owner of the land. And I don't think many HOAs are going to say, please let us eliminate parking spaces. It's more, I think, on a situation like Sully Station, the impact from if there's adjacent apartments or apartments to be built that don't have enough parking in the streets that aren't, like if there's public streets where you can park along the side, somebody would do that. Maybe from a shopping center, there's going to be less parking than there is now. The administrative approvals of whatever also cut the citizens out of an opportunity to speak up and say, hey, wait a minute, this is going to affect us. Why are you doing this?
Okay,
that's the way we understand it.
all right. But there's no study saying how much, like various shopping centers, like you mentioned Sully Station. Like I haven't seen anything saying this is gonna cost $18 billion or something, you know, redoing everything to private businesses. Right? I mean, there's no study. I mean, I haven't seen anything. I just see words on paper, but I haven't seen any data analytics saying this is the number of shopping centers in the county. We can redo this. This would cost millions of dollars. It'd take 10 years to do it. Nothing, right?
I
It's
think
words
that's
on paper.
part of Donna Jacobson's objection, is she said she's asked for that backup and they they give her double talk, or, you know, they did it in Portland or Amsterdam or something, and where people can walk. And we are still very spread out and very automobile dependent. And
Oh, I
don't
agree
know-
with that. Yeah.
I don't know that our numbers are going to be comparable to Portland or Amsterdam or anything else.
I think the whole country, Denmark could fit in Fairfax County or something, you know,
Easily.
so.
Yeah, and if you look at areas around the county that have had significant redevelopment, like around Tyson's. And I can remember when a lot of the newer high-rise developments around Tyson's were much smaller, little freestanding office buildings or auto dealerships.
Mhm.
But over time, they went through that whole long elaborate rezoning process and said, well, we're going to do that. And beyond what the original county plan was, which was for one transit station on the Silver Line out in the median of the Dulles Toll Road, the final option was, no, there's going to be 4 stations there. Yeah. So that totally changed things there and really allowed a lot of that development to take place. You look at what they're doing in parts of Vienna along 123. They're changing low density, 1-story commercial into 4 to 5-story condos and higher density apartments, but they're putting in the appropriate amount of parking to support that. Same thing in Falls Church. That's really changed a lot the last 15, 20 years, but they're putting in the appropriate amount of parking, even if they're fairly close to a transit station. Because you find that a lot of people, if they live close to transit, say, well, maybe I don't need to have 3 cars. I probably still need to have 2 cars because I live close to transit. I can use transit to get to my job downtown or wherever. I think we've seen the last 3 or 4 years, that's changing a lot too.
It may be legitimate to have less parking right at the doorstep of the metro, but this is too flexible. If we're saying 1.3, it really isn't 1.3 because the director can do an administrative approval of another 60% below that. So it may not be 1.3, it may be like point something. And nobody's going to know. Nobody's going to be able to speak up and say something.
Yeah, right. And another point on that is, what is the demonstrated technical abilities of that executive director to be able to make such a technical decision? Is he or she going to be a registered professional planner? Are they going to be a registered professional engineer? Are they going to have any experience or qualifications whatsoever in the area of travel demand management?
Or the staff, I'm sure they're gonna ask.
Don't assume that. Never assume that the staff's gonna have that capability.
Okay,
To be somebody who worked for a developer.
good. So, Louis, give me those points so we can add that in there as well.
Okay,
Okay, because those are good questions and they're good specific questions of the certification and background training, which may be glossed over by all of us to say that person shouldn't have the responsibility. Now you've given us, does that person have these capabilities, training?
So their answer might be that the administrator is a person of administration and not a person of technical expertise. And to your point, they're going to rely on the staff to have the technical expertise,
Well, then
which you can never guarantee.
So what we're gonna say is that
Never
will
get.
staff always have these skills available for them to be able to make that
And who's
decision?
the administrator beholden to behind the scenes that you don't
Is
know?
the person who appointed him, that means the county executive, whose way you want to do this and make it happen. Yeah, it's,
to keep the Board of Supervisors happy.
there you go. Okay, then, all right, so we're gonna bring this back again in the merry month of May. And we have what you have from here, the points I made, Lewis is gonna give me his inputs. We'll play it around and we'll send the draft to the associated people for their input as well and reading pleasure. Okay, I want to remind folks, and I'm gonna send out a doodle to find out if people can attend. Right now, across the street, we're gonna meet on the 13th of May, which is a Saturday, I think. 13th is.
Yeah.
Okay? And we will meet on the 13th at 10 a.m. at the Preserve, to get a tour. Okay? And I'm gonna make it known if people liked it, because remember, this was advertised to us as an innovative apartment complex. And it was first put in, what, 4 or 5 years ago? So by request, I went in there one day and said, hey, can you do this for us? And they came back and said, yeah, we worked some dates and that'll be in May. Okay, basically 4 weeks from this past Saturday. Okay,
Can they document what their parking rate is?
we can ask that question.
Both the supply and the usage.
Okay, well, they might know that when we ask them that question. Okay, then, so I want you to be aware of that. Now, some upcoming meetings, the 2023 paving and striping program for the area of Sully is April 18th tomorrow. The Route 28 bypass public information meeting is the 19th. Okay, and special point, the Fairfax Federation Citizen of the Year Honors Banquet is going to be on, do I have it here? 7 May, Sunday. And one of the honorees is, raise your hand. Okay, who was nominated by, raise your other hand. Jim, he put his head down. Okay, so Jim nominated John. John is the 2021 Fairfax County Federation Citizen of the Year. Okay, if you'd like to be out there to support him, please attend the banquet on the 7th of May. The food's usually good, and we're honoring people who've done a lot for us. John Litzenberger's honor is well reserved. Well reserved. Reserved? Okay, I want to mention that so that people can be aware. I'll send that out and try to get people, because we have had many Sully residents nominated as Citizen of the Year, going back to Glenn Stroop. If you remember Glenn 20-odd years ago, who was instrumental in this organization. Now, a week and 2 days from today, we have the Hate Crimes Forum. We have the school superintendent who's going to come. She may be a little late. She has another thing, but she's planning to be here. We have the Commonwealth's attorney for Fairfax County who's going to be here. We have somebody from the Anti-Defamation League. We have feelers out to the Latina and to the Asian Pacific and to the NAACP groups as well, to see if any one of those 3 other organizations would like to attend. We're going to have a regional director from the ADL attend. So, and I'm also still pinging the police and the county executive as well. But right now we have 3 people attending. It should be an interesting conversation. And just this week, you heard things were happening out in Loudoun County. In fact, in Loudoun County's, in the paper this week, reported that Loudoun County, in a drive for equity, came up with a group of people, if they heard things that were unsettling, would report it. And the Supreme Court and the circuit judge ruled that it was unconstitutional as limitation of free speech. If somebody said, I didn't know that, I don't understand, I don't think there's such a thing as white privilege. Somebody can write that down and report that person. And so these are the type of things that are bubbling up. It was in the Post this week, I saw that article. And this ties back into hate crimes and stuff like that. That's a hate crime. He's impugning on that.
Oh, for crying.
Okay, that was allowed it. And we know the situation in Montgomery, there's a lot more reported. And so there are other areas as well. So I just wanted people to be aware of that. Okay, any other comments or questions? We have something scheduled for next month's land use meeting on the 15th, and that's a proposed data center or alternatively a warehouse on property located immediately to the west of the Chantilly Auto Park. We saw that parcel once before, and it's basically inaccessible from Route 50, and there's an access point through the Chantilly Water Park, and you have to go through there to get there.
Isn't that a swamp?
It borders on the creek, Bull Run, Pub Run.
I thought they were protecting, what I saw was the data center's a small part of it. And then they were
Oh, yeah,
undisturbed.
yeah, most of it's undisturbed, but it's a big parcel, and they're trying to do what they can.
Yeah, right next to
Yeah.
like Twitter or something.
Yeah, so basically, if 80% of it is unusable, they want to try to do the 20%.
Yeah, they're just doing part of it.
Okay, but that, and so we have a report, that's Evan Pritchard, who's been here before, and so the property's located, and so I think we're scheduling it for, well, yeah, look. 67 of RPA, 67 acres of our RPA, that's a pretty big percentage.
Right.
Okay,
On
Go
the,
ahead.
on the data center, the, one of the things they're asking for, if you can believe it, is a height increase. It's going to be a very large building, and that may raise other questions too. The one thing I would suggest, if you have the time, John was, kind enough to drive me back from the hospital end of February. We came down Loudoun County Parkway from Route 7 to Braddock Road, which I never do. I come down Evergreen Mills or 28, but we came down Loudoun County Parkway. And I had seen the data centers from 28, but I hadn't seen the Parkway. And I'm sitting in the passenger seat, you know, looking out the window or whatever. And you saw the movie Home Alone with the little kid, and he's going with his hands to his face. If you haven't done that trip between 7 and Braddock down Loudoun County Parkway to see Data Center Alley or whatever it is, oh my God. It's an e-ticket at Disney World.
well, if you ever gone to Wegmans, continued west to Ford's Fish Shack,
Right.
and to your left and to your right is Data Center Alley, probably on a 90-degree intersection of the county, of the Loudoun County Parkway. But from the Ashburn east to Route 28 is, as you say, big, large structures.
Yeah, and there's more of those being built all the time because my office complex with the feds and other people is in what used to be the Verizon Center complex there. It's a little bit south of Wax Pool on Loudoun County Parkway. Totally surrounded now by data centers either completed or still under construction. Every place there is an empty parcel of land, that's the preferred by right land use.
Well, and one
Have
thing
you
about it,
seen the by right one on 50 at Stonecroft Boulevard? The one that's going in now?
the one on Avian? Avian?
Yeah.
Yep.
I was driving by that and I was like, oh my God, I took a picture from the car. I couldn't believe, and it's right up on the road.
Well, you know-
We've got to be creating some kind of massive heat island, raising the temperature or something.
By right, could they build an office building that size?
Well, if they build an office building, it's not going to have generators spewing diesel fumes off the roof. And they're not going to be sucking up the
Yeah.
same quantities of water and electricity.
Just put fake windows. Would anybody notice?
They are starting to do that on
You
some.
don't even notice, right? You just put fake windows
You know,
up.
there used to be a Lockheed Martin building on the Fairfax County Parkway, east of between the toll road and Sunrise Valley.
Yep.
And it had green shaded windows. It was a secure government facility. It had no windows, but those green shaded items gave you the impression that there were, but there was no way to look out.
If they put fake windows, they put the generators behind the building.
Yeah,
No one's
and
gonna notice.
But remember, this stuff is.
Go to the jail, they have fake windows just like that.
So if it's underneath the airport right away, do you really want apartments and other things there? So I understand something like that. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, it's 8:20. I thank you for coming out tonight.
Yeah.
And I thank you, Jim, for all your hard work. Remember, 7 May, honor John Litzenberger. I want to see a Sully contingent there applauding John when he gets up and says, okay? So.
Yeah.
Thank you, Jeff.
the link
Thank
is
you,
on
Jim.
the agenda here, and you just say, for more information, click here, and you'll get that link, and you can apply, and you can attend. We look forward to seeing you there for that.
Okay.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you.
Thank you.
We can hear people now.
All right. Good night.
Good night.
Good night, John.
It always works out.
Well, I'm glad that the speaker is actually better, but it's just difference between John Litzenberger's microphone and.
Another
Yeah.
thing,
It's the computer uses.
another thing with the generators, the data centers. I don't fully understand what they're talking about, because my understanding generators for emergency backup.
Yeah.
Right.
But they
Now,
have to be tested.
Once a
okay,
month.
okay, I sent these graphics out. The generators for Fair Oaks Hospital are within a few hundred feet of those residential homes. They gotta test them. They gotta light them up and test them. Do they complain? Then why would anybody complain about a data center lighting up the generators every once in a while to test them? Like, I don't understand the difference between a hospital that has generators and a
Well,
data
there-
center
there-
that has generators.
There probably isn't that much from a visual impact or noise impact, but if you've never experienced it, suddenly, oh, I imagine it's gonna be horrible.
And it's not just a now and then test, it's a constant 24/7.
No, they're not gonna burn diesel.
They don't have to.
See, why
No,
would
it's
they,
from the
that would be.
fans, it's from the cooling fans, that's where the foam comes from.
But again, they're hooked up to the electrical system.
Yep.
They got a substation. 99, the only time they're gonna drop that, the only time they go generators, they lose power. So, they would lose like current power, like the main power would drop in a millisecond to keep the servers up. They'd flip the generator, just like a
That's the
hospital
case,
life
these
support
people
system.
in Chicago wouldn't have sued.
So-
24/7, no.
Look at
It's gotta be coming from.
the Sully Community Center and the townhouses west of the Air Space Museum Parkway. Prior to this, they backed up to the old EDS facility, which is now becoming a data center. The people on the northern end of that western section of the homes, no, right before Ed's Drive,
Oh, right.
where Air and Space hits Ed's
Yeah,
Drive.
okay, yeah, I know.
Those people bought it directly on that property. If those generators are nearby, those houses are very close to it. And when they moved there, it wasn't a data center. It was the Ed's whatever property it was. And now they've got a completely different thing, and they had no input to that. The only time they came to us is, remember, we could hear them at the power supply by Virginia Power, but the dog that wailed the tag was not subject to our approval.
Right.
All we got a chance to talk about is the electrical connection.
I think Jim has a point.
Yeah, people are,
We're complaining about the generators for those, when there's plenty of other generators around that make the noise. I think what it's become is just one of the other data points. of
yeah, but
complaint.
they are harping on that when it's not a major point, is what Jim
Right,
said.
right, and I agree. But again, it's additive to all the other issues that the data center creates. The humming noise of the fans going constantly from the cooling center. I mean, that is a noise that after about.
Well,
10
I
minutes,
mean,
you
I
don't
don't,
stand.
again, I don't know if they have shielding around it and the noise just goes up instead of out. I mean,
Let me know your resolution.
Thank you so much. We'll send it out to everybody. You'll get a copy as well. Okay? Thank you for attending.
It'd be good to have like, again, bullet points rather than here's the
I
entire.
can't
because I've
believe
got
they
to
would not get to.
Put it in
And-
easily to understand.
I copy your summation for all
It
records.
is, the count, I just,
Yeah. And hopefully.
I can't
we've
believe
got
the
Cynthia
building-
things
You gotta
that-
summarize that for her, Jeff?
they're just
Thank
gonna.
you.
You gotta summarize those
Fans,
points
like-
for her?
No, what I told you, because I told Bonnie is that I use her summary for all points.
She was at
Instead of like 25, like normal. And they're not gonna care, and the county's not gonna care. I just, I find it hard to believe that they're gonna be that stupid to allow, if they're in the middle of the desert, they don't.
My guess is the computer is using
I
a
agree.
better microphone.
You may be right, but I would also then pose a very simple direct question to the members of the planning.
It has nothing to do with connection. Yeah, I didn't think so.
Would you live in a house within 100 yards of these data centers? Yes or no, is all I want to hear.
Yeah, but like, I mean, even up on EDS Drive, I don't think they're within 3 yards. I mean, I can go to Google Map and look at it.